Are the US government covering up information about UFOs even to their department that is supposed to look into all things UAP, the Arrow subject? Now, this came to my attention after Jeff Nucatelli, I think that's how I pronounce it, went on a podcast to discuss the incident with the red squared UFO in Vandenberg back in 2006, I believe. And he was one of the key witnesses. He's an ex-military officer who was witness to this red UFO, and he sought the help of Arrow to try and understand what the red square that he saw outside the military base was on that night that he saw it. And after Arrow dug very deep into it, they discovered that all police records, all records, and all footage and evidence had been deleted. Now, a lot of people would say that's a coincidence, but we're going to look into it to see if it truly was a coincidence. Now, this isn't the first time we've heard about this red UFO that was caught, as 6 months ago, during one of the very first congressional hearings for UAPs, a flying object the size of a football field apparently hovered over Vandenberg base in 2003. I was mistaken with 2006, sorry about that. 2003. So this was the initial kind of story that broke around this subject.
My next question would actually be for Mr. Graves. Can you please explain to me in detail the event that occurred at Vandenberg Air Force Base?
Certainly.
Now, Mr. Graves is also someone who witnessed the event. He was there alongside Nucatelli, who was, you know, they both witnessed the exact same phenomena at the exact same time.
In the 2003 timeframe, a large group of Boeing contractors were operating near one of the launch facilities at Vandenberg Air Force Base when they observed a very large 100-yard sided red square approach the base from the ocean and hover at low altitude over one of the launch facilities. This object remained for about 45 seconds or so before darting off over the mountains. There was a similar event within 24 hours later in the evening. This was a morning event, I believe 8:45 in the morning. Later in the evening, post-sunset, there were reports of other sightings on base, including some aggressive behaviors. These objects were approaching some of the security guards at rapid speeds before darting off. And this is information that was received through one of the witnesses that have approached me at Americans for Safe Aerospace.
Now, that's very interesting because obviously, you know, to witness it once is one thing, but then to witness it again at the exact same place around 12 to 24 hours later, and it to be deemed rather aggressive, that's alarming. That's alarming. But obviously, I'm not sure. He never really goes into detail whether the phenomena was the exact same thing that they witnessed prior. So the red square that was believed to be around 100 foot long. But we watch on.
Was this documented in any official form, whether it was a police blotter?
Yes, they had official documentation and records from the event that the witness held over the years.
Now, that's something very, very important to bear in mind because that's going to be pivotal to our story later on.
And I'm not going to ask you to do it right now for time reasons, but you'd be able to sketch what was witnessed, correct? And have you seen that before on any other equipment and or during your flight time?
I have not seen what they've described. This object was estimated to be almost the size of a football field, and I have not seen anything personally that large.
Okay, and then another question on follow-up referencing the gimbal video Go Fast incident.
Now, obviously, they go on to then speak about a further incident, but we're not interested in that one. We're only interested in the red UFO. So, moving forwards, we're going to jump forwards. So that was last year, around 6 months ago. Moving forwards to January of this year, the Air Force officer, otherwise known as Jeff Nucatelli, was on the Merged podcast, and he kind of went through in depth across the whole podcast. We're not going to use the whole podcast. I'm going to use specific clips that I found that are important to this story, because he goes on about a lot of things, but this one in particular was mind-boggling. And he goes into detail about how his side of the events and what he witnessed, and I think we're going to watch that first, and then later on in the podcast they discuss some very controversial things. surrounding the US government and Arrow. So let's take a little look at this part first.
So the story is about 8:45 in the morning. The dispatcher gets a call from range control, a technical sergeant from range control, and he says, I'm reporting an event that occurred at LF-21 and LF-10, two different sites in the same location. And what he said was the contractors working on site called range control, and he said there was a gigantic floating red square over LF-21 at low altitude, and they were just standing there watching this thing.
Was it a three-dimensional object? It just appeared to be a square, and it just couldn't tell?
There were three contractors that worked for Boeing that saw this object.
Now, obviously, like I think they mentioned it in the previous clip, but in case you missed it, there was a Boeing factory, so the Boeing engines, factory not too far from the military base, and these contractors were also some people that witnessed the event.
And they wrote sworn written statements. To the best of my recollection, it was a somewhat flattened square plane, yeah, and basically just a big square object, the size of a football field.
Now, obviously, there's consistencies within the story: the size of a football field, the small, the squished kind of square shape, and red.
Silently floating over the launch pad.
Another consistent side of the story: silently floating.
Red in color, glowing this red color. So, as far as I know, it wasn't a cube. It was like a flattened square.
Got it.
At 8:45, the call came in from range control. They said the contractors say there's this gigantic floating red square over the launch facility, and the flight chief and the senior patrolman drove out to the facility, and they met the contractors, and then later they brought in the technical sergeant from range control that called in the initial call, that received the complaint from the contractor saying there's this UFO. They brought that person in and had him write a written statement. I have his written statement, and I also have the blotter entry. And I'm just like, okay, this is crazy, you know. I was like completely like excited about the event because it was real.
So that's a pivotal thing, part of this. That last line, it was real. So we've got this giant squished square red football field sized UFO hovering silently over a launch bay, over a military base, spotted by contractors and military personnel. There are written statements made, sworn statements at that, you know, and there's all this information. All of this has also been documented. It's important to note that. Now, this man right here, Jeff Nicatelli, he decided that what he was going to do was he was going to approach Arrow. Now, Arrow, if you don't know, are a kind of subsection of Congress who basically any UFO or UAP phenomena that's been cited gets reported to Arrow. Arrow then investigate. They then compile all the information that they can find and present it to Congress. 9 times out of 10, it's something explainable. But in this occasion, Jeff takes the information to Arrow. Arrow's job is then to investigate this story. When Arrow went to search through archives and search through information, it's been deleted, removed, lost. Which means that they cannot have a conclusive answer to what was witnessed over Vandenberg back in 2003. Now, this was kind of posted to a Reddit thread, the r/UFOs Reddit thread, and the person who posted it, the submitter, stated, "I've been skeptical and critical of Arrow and its non-committal public relationship regarding historical cases of UAP, but Vandenberg UFO witness, who had his own sighting separate from the Red Square encounter, says that he had a positive experience with Arrow personnel." Now, what's important is it was a positive experience with Arrow themselves, because they were very willing to help uncover the mystery around this red UFO. Who updated him accordingly about this case and gave him no restrictions regarding his sighting and experience, as it was already, quote, public knowledge. So he was allowed to go and kind of speak about it because the public already knew about this. Arrow told him they investigated files and documents relating to the 2004 incident at VAFB, but found that the DoD had a data problem and lost, deleted or destroyed police records, military blotters and witness statements regarding the case and many others. According to this, Arrow's hands are tied when it comes to a lot of cases because the DoD, through apathy or malice, has lost or destroyed official records of a multitude of incidents. Now, isn't that interesting? So, when you hear it from Jeff himself, the context, there's a lot more context to it, and it really sheds some light on the true nature of this situation.
The thing that was difficult to kind of wrap my head around with the conversation with Arrow is they are very limited in what they can do with a historical case, right?
Now, that's obviously because it depends on public knowledge, it depends on information regarding that time, whether it was mass reported, whether there was any documentation around it. You know, there's a lot of stuff to go into. If I was to say I saw a UFO in 1982, even though I wasn't born until 1998, Arrow would be like, okay, and, like, what do you want us to do about it? But if I went to them today and I was like, look, I saw this, they could then go around people of that area and say, did you witness this? Did you witness this? Have you got any footage? And they can compile all of that evidence.
So maybe as much as they would like to go back to 2003 and look at the archives and look at the records and investigate and bring this out, not that it's their job to bring this out, and I think people need to understand that too. Like if you're going to Arrow hoping that they're going to investigate your case and then display it to the public, that's unlikely to happen. That's not what their mandate is. And I think that might be some of the frustration that people have. They're like, hey, I called Arrow a year ago and there's nothing.
Now, obviously, that's because their job or mandate is not to present it to the public. It's not to present it to you if you're the one that reported it. Their mandate is to present it to Congress. Now, obviously, I should imagine, I can't say for certain, but I should imagine there's probably so many hurdles that they have to jump over before they're allowed to actually present it to Congress at all. It probably has to go through the DoD, the Pentagon, classification records. Is this allowed to be shared? If so, what's allowed to be shared? And then after that, is it even worth sharing because most of the information might be classified? You know, I should imagine there is a lot that goes into it. Now, that's not factual. I don't know that for certain. That's just my speculation around the situation.
They're not talking about it, and I don't think that's what Arrow's going to do. That's not their mandate. It's not really their mission. Theirs is to collect data. So,
did you have to sign any type of NDA?
No. I think there's a lot of confusion with the NDA because people with classified information, or they've signed an NDA, they're allowed, according to the law, they can go to Arrow and disclose. They can break that NDA or share that classified information with Arrow, but with Arrow only. And I think that's where some more of the frustration comes in because people are thinking that by providing Arrow the information, it will declassify the event. That will not happen. Yeah. Mine is different because it's unclassified. The documents I have are unclassified. The event was public knowledge. It was in the blotter, which is a publicly available document. Yeah. So I didn't have to worry about any of that. And then I asked him, you know, after we're done, am I going to be able to share his story? And they're like, absolutely. It's your story. You could tell it to whoever you want.
Now, that's only because it was already public information. If this was not public information and something came of it, none of us would ever know about this story. Probably ever. I'd be very surprised.
So overall, a very positive experience. But getting back to the limit on what they can do, I received information that a lot of the records are gone.
Now, isn't that interesting?
The blotters are gone. Police reports are gone.
What does gone mean?
Gone means deleted, lost, destroyed.
So the police blotters and a lot of the data associated. Was this just at Vandenberg? Was this just at your wing or your?
From what I understand, and it's a bit of a complex story, but starting in 2007 timeframe, the DoD realized that there was a data problem, because what happened was there was a break in the system. What happened was a military member in Texas that was not, he was under multiple investigations by multiple different agencies. The data should have been put into NCIC, which is the National Crime Information System, where all the law enforcement data goes into. So if you can't have a firearm, it goes into that database. If you're a sex offender, it goes into that database. If you have a warrant, it's in that database. They had an incident where a military member in lots of trouble was not allowed to have a gun. His information was not loaded up into NCIC. He was able to purchase a firearm. He went into I think it was a church in Texas, and killed a bunch of people.
It wasn't that long ago, was it?
This was not long ago. And then when the investigation that came out of that event, they started looking, and they're like, there's huge, massive amounts of law enforcement data missing in the DoD. And apparently there was an Inspector General investigation, why that case wasn't uploaded, and what they found out was data's gone. It's been lost, destroyed, deleted. And from what I understand, this is DoD-wide, and the historical records are gone. I'm hoping that's not true, and I'm hoping that can be verified. But it could be, and that's the thing. The paperwork I have is now that much more important, because there might not be a record of it.
Now, obviously, there was justification for why the information, there was a data problem. Does it necessarily link to it? I don't know. That could just be a cover story for all I know, but very, very interesting nonetheless. So, what do you think of this? It seems that even Arrow, although part of this congressional system, although created by Congress to present information regarding UAPs and UFOs, they're not untouchable, I guess. They have things, roadblocks in their way, even though they should be the people that we should be able to go to and be like, what's the crack on this? But obviously, like Jeff explained in his interview, that's not the case. They're not ever going to declassify a case if it's under classification, I guess. So, what do you make of this? Do you think it's convenient that all those files were lost, deleted, and destroyed? Or do you think it's down to a data breach, data issue, and, they just mass deleted a load of stuff? I'll leave it for you guys to discuss down in the comments. And while you're down there, be sure to jump to get the hell out of that like button, subscribe if you're new, and tickle my little bell so you get notified whenever we upload. And until next time, guys, I hope that you have enjoyed. I cannot wait to see you in the next one. I'll speak to you later. Peace.